Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So, welcome to the end of November Q&A. This is a thing I started last month and it seemed to go down pretty well. So I thought I'd carry it on for a few more months and see where it takes us. So as with last month, I'm going to go through every single comment and question that's come in on this channel in the last 30 days or so. And I've tried to reply to them in the comment section, but for the more interesting and relevant ones, I thought I'd make some more detailed responses in today's video. So two of the biggest videos I've had in the last month have been the comparison of the wonderful Fane A60 speaker with the various Celestians. I think the comparison with the gold and the blue have gone up since I last made one of these videos. Now, I'm not going to address any of those comments today. I'm going to make a standalone video about the Fane Celestian speaker comparisons. So if you've commented under that video with a question, I'll do my best to get to them, but it'll be in a standalone video in a couple of weeks' time. So the other sort of really big video has been the Lightning Boy 2020 instrument transformer, which I would hold up, but it's bolted onto my pedal board at the moment and I can't be bothered to move it. So some questions that are coming off the back of that. Elliot Main asks, I'm really curious about how a transformer in a preamp like the Hudson Broadcast can be pushed into insane fuzz tone, but here it wouldn't do anything more than a subtle, even with 30 dB of gain into it. Yeah, it really was subtle, wasn't it? I think with the sort of transformer-based pedals, you know, overdrives and fuzzers and whatever, Supro do a lot of them, I think it really depends how that transformer is integrated into the circuit and what sort of transformer it is. So in the 2020, it's a proprietary transformer handmade by Mike at Lightning Boy, and it's a one-to-one transformer. So maybe inside something like the Hudson Broadcast, it's something other than a one-to-one transformer, a one-to-two maybe, to really sort of saturate the core and boost the gain internally, but also how it's integrated into the circuit. Are you boosting into it and then dropping the level down afterwards so you can boost really hard into it but not have a crazy output level? Something like that. You know, I did email Michael at Hudson to ask about how he uses the transformer in the broadcast. Haven't heard back from him yet. But the 2020 is designed to be a subtle, completely passive. There's no power to it either, so you can't really gain it up by boosting into it. You know, in itself, it is just a transformer. So it's designed to be subtle, to sort of pass the audio through for very gentle coloration. It's not designed to be a fuzz box, and even boosting into it, it's not designed to break up in itself too much. You can saturate the core for a little bit of coloration, but it's not really intended to be a sort of crazy fuzz in the way the broadcast is. So I think it really depends how the transformer is integrated into the circuit as to how gainy you can make it get. Let's see then. Digital Chris, I couldn't hear any difference. I'd spend the cost of this pedal on booze and loose women. Well, whatever you're into, Digital Chris, but yeah, I kind of agree. It was $99 plus shipping from the States, plus import duty, plus VAT here in the UK. So it was quite pricey by the time I got my hand on it. And, you know, for something you may be spending £150 on all in, there are things you can spend £150 on that will make a lot more difference to your tone. So, yeah, it is a box of subtlety, absolutely. Paul Ewing, never sure how to pronounce that. Simply put, I see no value for money with it. I think in a band context, it would be ineffectual. Yep, completely agree. It is incredibly subtle, and unless you're A-Bing it with, you know, the before and after of having it inline and not, yeah, you're going to struggle to hear any noticeable difference in pretty much any situation that I put it in. Bill Gaber, hi Joe, thanks for the videos. Are the primary and secondary windings tied to a common ground? If not, then using this as a ground lifter could mean the difference between good sound or hum. This could be one of those tools that we should toss in our gig bags and hope that it never needs to come out. Now, I'm not an expert in this whatsoever, but as far as I'm aware, it's not an isolating transformer pedal. Mike at Lightning Boy does make another version of this called the 2020i, I think it is, and the I stands for isolation. So you can use that inline to isolate one signal from another signal, but this is just an in and an out. There's no isolation happening as far as I'm aware. So yeah, you won't find the 2020 coming in useful for isolating guitar signal sources to solve ground loop hum problems and things like that. The 2020i is much more suited to that, but the standard 2020, it's just a colour box really. Now, the next big video this month has been the upgrade to my lovely Heritage H535. I tweaked the pickups, put the Monty's paths in, Faber hardware, VI pots, Bumblebee capacitors, 50s wiring, all of that. So somebody described this as being perky spec now, which I thought was a great description of just, you know, as good as it can be. I'm very happy to kind of hold that badge of honour. Now this question is from Ben Martinez. Nice guitar. Do you reckon the Heritage to be as good as the Collings? And I've been asked this quite a few times about Heritage guitars and how they compare to Collings guitars. Now, I've never played a Collings, is the honest truth of it, but I've read a lot of forums of people who have directly compared the two. And I think the general consensus is when it comes to quality control, the Collings is a league above pretty much any other guitar manufacturer ever. Like Bill Collings, I think he's passed away now, but when he was alive, he was just like so anal when it came to QC, it was ridiculous. So every guitar that ever left the factory, if it had like a tiniest of imperfections on it, it was a reject. Like every guitar was just absolutely perfect to the point of almost being a bit clinical, depending on who you listen to. So as I said, this is just what I've gleaned from reading forums. I think this is a handmade guitar made very much in the old tradition. And as I said, I think in one of the previous two videos on this guitar, there are a few wonky lines in places, like where the binding's been scraped and little bits have been missed. And, you know, it's definitely a handmade instrument. But to be honest, I love the imperfections. I like the fact that this guitar's been made by people who have learnt their craft. I'm not saying the Collings aren't, because they obviously are, but it's just a sort of old school, you know, like when people say about old 50s Gibsons how no two necks are the same because they're all done by hand, that's the same with the Heritage. Like you can kind of feel that somebody's made this thing. I know that sounds a bit hippie-ish, but to me that's what I get from it. Now the Collings, as I said, is, you know, a tier above in terms of quality control, but let's not forget the Collings is like twice the price, if not more, of a brand new Heritage. So that is something to take into account as well. You probably get what you pay for, but are you getting twice the guitar for twice the price? No, absolutely not. So it's a judgment call. It depends if something like a handmade Heritage is good enough or you want like absolute pristine quality. Personally, I'd go for the Heritage every time because as soon as you play it, you're going to scuff it and put a ding in it, and then all of a sudden the QC isn't perfect anymore. So it depends, but you know, it's a judgment call. As I said, I can't comment on this myself because I've never played the Collings, but that's what I've been able to get from forums at least. What finish is this? Almond Burst or Autumn Burst? Well, according to the label, Nick VT Guitar, this is Dark Almond Sunburst. And I think this is one of the best looking guitars I've ever seen. The flame, I don't know if you can see it because it's only in the right light it appears, but the flame in the top is just outstanding. And I wasn't 100% on the colour at first when I saw the photos before I bought this guitar, but since having it in my hands, it is just absolutely stunning. I love this guitar so much. Javier Lippi? Sorry, I think I've just butchered your name a little bit there. This is that magical moment when you can see the loudness of the amps. And this is when I demoed the upgrades a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I was going through my Cornell Romani Plus and my Dr. Z DB4. The Romani was up to 11 and the DB4 was maybe up to 7. So it was really gainy. And I was controlling the gain and volume using the guitar's volume controls. Yeah, they were really cooking. But you get that two-way flow of, you know, the guitar starting to feed back and you can feel what you're playing and feel the extra vibrations from playing at volume. That's how I like to do it. And almost every demo you ever hear on this channel is recorded with guitar amps that are absolutely belting loud. I get a lot of very nice comments, which are very kind, on audio quality. And I think that's one of the reasons for it. I'm doing it using really good amps, using microphones on those amps, and the amps are turned up to the point where they're working. It's the only way to do it, I think. Now, the last comment on the Heritage video was probably one of my favourite comments I've ever received. David Bird. And they say, "Hi Joe, I'm Dave and I've worked for Gibson Guitar in Nashville for 23 years. I now build the fingerboards and necks for Heritage. It's nice to see you like the guitar so well. You're right, the pickups were the only real weak link. The new pickups you put in the 535 are a great improvement. It sounds great. I enjoy your video, man. Keep rocking." Well, I always love getting comments from the people who actually made the gear that I'm really enjoying. There's some of my favourite comments to receive, so thank you so much, Dave, for getting in touch. I don't know if you were at Heritage back in 2011 when this was made. I'm guessing not if you were with Gibson for 23 years, but keep up the good work, mate, because you and the Heritage make absolutely stunning instruments. I am blown away by this thing. So, moving on to a different topic then. Who's this? Legangsvuk. 50s rules. This is 50s wiring on a Les Paul. But why have they changed it? There must be a reason. Who knows the answer? I think no one ever really did find out a sort of clear, concrete answer on that. My guess is that with the 50s wiring, when you roll the tone control down, you do get a level drop. People always say that the tone and the volume are much more interactive with 50s wiring. So with the 50s wiring, yes, you retain more high end as you roll the volume down, but you do lose level as you roll the tone down. Whereas with the modern, you lose a little bit more high end with the volume, but you don't get that level drop with the tone. So I'm guessing that's probably why they did it, because people would be complaining that they want to darken the guitar but not lose as much gain as they did that. I'm guessing, you know, my speculation again, but yeah, that's my take on it. I personally prefer 50s wiring, but my Les Paul Standard has modern wiring, and I have never touched anything on that guitar. You live with it, you know, you get used to it in each guitar, and you just kind of work around it. 50s wiring versus modern wiring, unless you're someone who lives on the volume control, doesn't make a huge difference. With everything wide open, you're not really going to tell much of a difference, if any. Captain Von Chicken. Captain Von Chicken Pants. My 2009 Les Paul Standard has a PCB. Not much I can do unless I gut it like a fish. Well, Captain Von Chicken Pants. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. My Les Paul Junior came with a really annoying Gibson solderless PCB tone and volume with a clip-on pickup, which is fine, assuming nothing goes wrong with it and assuming you don't want to try different pots and caps and pickups. It makes everything pretty useless and limiting if you've got the PCB stuff there and you want to try something else. So yeah, I did gut my Les Paul Junior like a fish and took it all out and put proper old school stuff in with a nice hand-wound pickup. So yeah, if you want to faff around with your guitar but you've got the PCB, ditch it. You know, 4 pots and, you know, stripping the pickup wire, it's not going to set you back a huge amount, but it gives you so many more flexible options going forward if you like tinkering with your guitars. Dean Paxton, can you talk about sustain? How can I achieve the most sustain without being too compressed and fairly clean? Yeah, I think for sustain, a new set of strings, first and foremost. It's amazing how quickly strings die. And I don't mean like they completely go off and they're going to start breaking, but the difference between a packet fresh set of strings and strings that have been on the guitar for like 3 or 4 days is substantial when it comes to sustain. So a brand new set of strings and a good setup on your guitar is worth its weight in gold. So, I mean, that can mean so many things. A properly cut nut so that the strings aren't snagging as they come through the nut, so the string can move freely through that. Very important. Having the right amount of relief in the neck. Too much and it'll be really hard to play, but you want a little bit of sort of bananaing in the neck, because otherwise when you play open strings especially, you get a lot of buzz around the middle. Having like properly notched saddles, having the height set properly, you know, all of these things, anything that takes vibration out of the string by not being cut properly or lined up properly, it's going to kill your sustain. Aside from that, and you know, a good setup and a fresh set of strings, hotter pickups generally sound a bit more compressed in themselves. Before you worry about amps and pedals and things, hotter pickups can sound a little bit more compressed in, you know, and a bit more spongy in how they feel. So you might want to look at pickups. It's quite an expensive option. Aside from that, my biggest tip, I think, is to use a compressor pedal, but use it in parallel. So on my pedal board, I use the Effectrode PC2A tube compressor, which is great, but it's quite a severe compressor. So I personally run it in the loop of a gig rig wet box so that I can add some transients back in, because then you get the sustain of the compressor, but you still get a bit of sort of snappy attack on the front of the note. It doesn't just go, it just take every dynamic away. You get the sustain, but you also get the transient. So any compressor with a mix or blend knob, same thing, will work for that. So you can dial the transients back in. But if you haven't got that, something like a parallel loop box, or I think the Gig Rig now make the wetter box. I use an old school wet box. Something like that is really, really good. Light gain overdrive as well. You know, it's just if you're hovering around the edge of gain, that can really make a difference. You know, just so your transients are kind of nipped, but you can use it creatively. You can dig into the guitar and make it crunch a little bit. But the other really important thing, I think, is having your amp loud. If you have your amp set with so much headroom you don't know what to do with it, then every spiky transient will be sort of blasting out. If you set the amp so that the output transformer is working and the output tubes are compressing, not necessarily enough to make it really gainy, but just everything's working and the speaker's working, you get a lot of compression out of a guitar speaker in itself. So having a good amount of SPL will make it sort of sound and feel more compressed, even though it might not necessarily sound too gainy. So those are my best tips, I think, but the parallel compression thing and a good setup on your guitar with a new fresh set of strings, you can't really go wrong with that. You'll get a lot more sustain out of a properly set up guitar. Now, universal power. If I hate the sound of my Alnico pickup, should I try a ceramic? My favourite was an Iomi Custom, which is a hybrid of both magnets, hence its unique sound. Trouble is they're out of production. Yeah, if you hate the sound of your guitar, definitely try something. There's no point in having a guitar you don't like the sound of. I wasn't aware of those Iomi pickups, but you can get some pickups that are kind of a hybrid of different magnets. I think it's the Ron Ellis 5060s, they're Strat pickups. I think they've got like 3 slugs that are Alnico 3 and 3 that are Alnico 5. So you get a more beefy sound low down and a sweeter top end up top. So you get like a hybrid of magnets. Yeah, absolutely try something different. You know, you say that custom builders, you know, don't really know the specs too much. It's worth asking around. I'm sure someone might, you know, and people do make custom pickups. If you know what the magnets are roughly, people might be able to experiment. But yeah, certainly try something. The difference between Alnico and ceramic, it very much depends on the design of the pickup. So certainly try something new. Go on eBay or Reverb and pick up something very different but cheap. And then if you like that, then you can maybe look at getting a slightly better version. But I would say if you're looking to experiment and you don't know what you're going after, buy second hand and start at the kind of the lower rungs of the ladder before you find what you like and move up. Otherwise you'll just waste money sort of chasing your own tail. So I would certainly recommend that. But definitely change something if you don't like the sound of your guitar. Glenn Marion, well done. What a dream guitar. This is the Heritage again. Do you own any guitars with a tremolo bar? Just curious about your thoughts on that. I do, but I don't use them very often. The tremolo, but I use those guitars, but not the tremolo. My Strat has a standard, you know, trem block with springs on it, but I've bolted the springs down so tight. It's not blocked off, but the springs are so tight that you have to really push it hard to get it to move. I like it to be solid. So I haven't taken the trem out or blocked it off, but I don't really use it. My Hagstrom and my Gretsch Duojet both have Bigsby's on. I think Bigsby's my favourite sort of vintage spec tremolo because I like a little bit of subtle waggle, but you know, nothing too extreme. And a Bigsby, you need to be fairly gentle with a Bigsby. You know, it doesn't make you want to go absolutely crazy. A little bit of subtle movement is all I ever find myself really wanting to do with a Bigsby. So I quite like them for that. I do own a it's a sort of custom built replica of an Ibanez Gem. You won't have seen it on the channel much unless you've watched some of my music videos. I don't really play that guitar all that much. It has a Fernandez sustainer in the neck, so I generally use it for sort of ebow sort of sustainer type sounds. That has a Floyd Rose on it, and to be honest, that's the biggest barrier to that guitar for me. It's why I don't play it very much. Because I pick it up, I spend 5 minutes going boo and doing crazy dive bombs, then I put it down, pick up a hardtail and actually play a song. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why I don't like a tremolo. I find it too distracting. I much prefer a hardtail, everything bolted down, rock solid, and to get any vibrato with my fingers. But I do go into Bigsby territory occasionally, but generally speaking, I'm in the hardtail camp. I don't use a trem very often. But, you know, a lot of people use them to great effect, and all power to them. Bradley Shuppert. This is about the Callahan bridges on my tellies, and I was comparing them to the stock Fender bridge. No difference, none whatsoever. You do strike the guitar heavier with the Callahan bridge as if you're digging for gold. Expecting something magical, you forget. You are hearing the sound of the frets, you only hear the nut or the saddles in open string, as they are the contact points. No difference, period. Well, I think there's a bigger conversation here, especially around how you listen to demos, and I might make a video about this at some point. I hear comments from people all the time sort of saying, I can't hear any difference. And I ask them how they're listening to it, and they say, oh, on my iPhone speaker. Yeah, you won't hear a difference on that. If you're listening to real subtleties, especially in the low end, you're not really going to hear that on a laptop or an iPhone speaker. You'll hear it on studio monitors and things, but people listening for really subtle things on tiny, tiny little phone speakers aren't necessarily going to work. So there's a bigger conversation around that point. But what I wanted to comment on this was you only hear the nut or the saddles in open string as they are the contact points. Oops. Now, I completely agree about the nut. You only hear that when you are playing an open string because that is the contact. As soon as you fret an F shape, you're not hearing the nut at all, aside from tuning stability. So I completely agree on that point. But the saddles are always the far end of your string speaking length. So whether it's the nut or the fret, that fret to that metal saddle is the speaking length of the string. You move it up from that fret to the saddle is the speaking length. So you're always hearing the sound of the nut, which is why going from brass saddles to titanium saddles or nylon saddles or whatever can have such a substantial difference across your guitar, playing in the full register of the instrument. So yes, going to a nut, people debate like, is a bone nut or a brass nut or a tusk nut the right one? Yes, it makes a difference if you're playing, an E minor chord because you've got 4 open strings in that. But as soon as you're playing bar chords, you don't hear the nut at all. So minimal gains to be had from changing the nut, aside from getting it cut properly for tuning stability and action. But with the saddles, you hear them all the time. So yeah, regardless of whether those Callahan bridges and saddles made a difference or didn't make a difference, you do hear the saddles regardless of where you're playing. So yes, the fret is one of the contacts, but you're also having that as the other end of the vibrating length of the string at any one time. So respectfully disagree on that one, Bradley Shubbert. A. It's nice and easy. Can a Vox top boost sound its best with green or creambacks, or are Alnico speakers a must? Define best. Best is a subjective term. Whatever the best sound for a speaker in an amp is what you prefer the most, ultimately, and what gives you the results you want. So historically, Vox amps had Alnico blues in, so they're the most common, and golds are the most common speakers and variations, and speakers based on the blue and the gold are generally what you'd go for that Vox sound. And Alnico speakers do tend to have a sweeter top end to them than ceramics. Ceramics tend to be a bit more mid-pushed, whereas Alnico speakers tend to be a bit more kind of happy face, thicker in the low end, brighter and chimier in the high end, and a bit more scooped in the mids. And for the Vox EL84 top boost sound, that's all about the chime. So the extra high end on the Alnico is generally where you would start for that. But ultimately, if you want a bit more rolled off sound and you like the kind of honky middly Brian May thing, if a ceramic speaker gets you there, great. There's no best. The only best is what works for you, ultimately. So, yes, Alnicos are the most common, but you can experiment and whatever gets you the sound that you want. Lamner MNB. Okay. I own a Korean Dan Electro U2 56 reissue. Snap. Would you change the bridge? Well, I changed the bridge on mine. That was the point of the video they were commenting on. Now, I changed this intonatable bridge. And originally it had a kind of floating wooden metal hybrid bridge. I changed to an all metal one, and I put a sort of slab of wood underneath so I could bolt the bridge onto the guitar so it wasn't floating. It just felt a bit flimsy. In terms of changing to this bridge, I'd only change things if you are curious about how it might sound, like I am, but ultimately if you only change something if you want to actually solve a problem and make something more to your tastes. So if you're having major intonation problems with your Dan Electro, then yeah, going to an intonatable bridge would solve that problem. But if you're happy with a wooden bridge, it sounds fine, you're not having intonation problems, the action's all good, there's not really any reason to spend money changing it aside from curiosity. So I'd be a little wary of changing things just for the sake of changing things. unless you're just going for tonal differences. If there's a problem that needs solving, go for it. If it's all absolutely fine, leave it alone. James, doesn't that make it collectible being a transition period pedal? And that was talking about my biggest pedal buying mistake, which was the Boss OD1, which had the 8-pin 4558 chip in, not the 14-pin chip, despite having a silver screw and a slightly wonky serial number. Check out that video to find out what went wrong there. Sometimes transition period pedals and guitars can become quite collectible because you get like a sort of mismatch of specs. You get like, older specs and newer specs, but they don't quite line up and it's not as clear cut. That can happen sometimes. With the OD1s though, to be honest, the 14-pin chip is pretty much the only thing that matters. All vintage OD1s are collectible up to a point. They do command pretty decent money, but the collectability, it's not so much on the screw in these, it's the chip. So if any 8-pin 4558 OD1 is less collectible than the 14-pin, that's pretty much all there is. It's not the transition period. I got stung, to be honest. It's not a collectible as such. I like the silver screw, but it wasn't worth the extra premium I paid on it thinking it had a 14-pin chip in it. So yeah, not so much with these. It can happen sometimes with some pedals and guitars and amps and things, but not so much the old OD1s. So moving on to the last couple of questions. Yeah, I love this one. This is mean comment of the month, I should say. And this is kind of two questions in one. I'll tell you the funny comment before I actually answer the question. This lady is deluded, picks a beautiful jazz guitar and then plays grunge through some awful pedals. On the basis of this, I would never buy one, and I am about to buy one. Well, I'm glad the video didn't put you off, Fox. That was about this guitar here, and occasionally I put a video up, which is just me playing around, and it ends up offending a lot of people. Now, I bought this guitar, and of course I'm not a jazzer, but this is primarily a jazz box guitar. And I made a video called something like, the Gretsch, I don't remember what the model is, G3900. Is it only good for jazz? And I wanted to see if I could, make it work in other situations. It was just a bit of fun, really. And man, did I upset some jazzers. I got a lot of abuse on that video from people who were like really into their jazz. I can't believe you're playing rock on a jazz guitar. I hate you. So read some of those comments, they're very funny. But yes, two things on that. Firstly, it was a bit of fun and I'm just playing around. And I was actually really happy with some of the tones in that video, to be honest. Secondly, if you want to have a go at me, don't you think I've heard that I've got long hair therefore I'm a lady line before? Probably best get a different line on that one. But the reason I included this is because there's a second part to this, really, which is Massey Gautier. Sorry, I pronounced that wrong again. What is the outro track? I love it. Great video as always. And that's the outro track I'm using at the moment on my YouTube videos. And that is a very sort of silly, quick song I threw together last year using some free drum stems from my friend Emily Dolan Davies. She puts out free drum stems every week. And I downloaded them and sort of wrote some music around the stems rather than chopping them up. But all of the sounds on the song that I use at the outro of these videos was done using this guitar. So all the sort of fuzzy, rocky delay sounds and whatever, whenever you hear the end of one of these videos, or I'll link to the video up there, go and listen to the full song. It's only like 2 minutes long or something. Every single guitar sound on that song was done with this. So I think as far as my own peace of mind is concerned, I answered the question of, is it only good for jazz? No, you can use it for some really interesting, unique sounds in a lot of different kind of genres and situations. But of course, upset a lot of jazzers in the process. So sorry, not sorry on that front. And the final comment today is from Steve Turner, who says, thanks for keeping me going through this lockdown. And I wanted to end on this note because, yeah, there's a lot of crap going on in the world at the moment. And we're all in this together. So if I have played some small role in making the lockdown a little bit better for Steve, then that's fantastic. So stick with us, Steve. Hopefully it'll all be over soonish, depending on what 2021 brings. But yeah, I think we're all in this together. We're all kind of keeping each other going with videos and quizzes and things like that. So yeah, as I said, I'm not going anywhere. I've got videos scheduled for the next month or so already. So you can rely on me for some content, whether it's good or bad is up to you, for the next, month at least. So yes, we're all keeping each other going, Steve. So thank you for being here. Thank you for commenting. It did mean a lot to read that. And yeah, let's help support each other and keep our morale up going forwards. So I think that's pretty much it for November's Q&A. As always, please do comment underneath any of my videos. I do read every comment that comes in. Comment underneath this video, any that are coming in the next month. I'll make another one of these on New Year's Eve, I guess. So yeah, please keep the comments coming. As I said, I do read them. I do try to answer them, but the really interesting and funny and sometimes abusive ones, I'll try to answer in one of these Q&A videos. So thank you, folks, and yeah, I hope this video was interesting and useful. Please do carry on subscribing. It does make a huge difference. I know I always say it, but it really does. And I will see you soon for another video. Bye-bye.